Hope everybody's doing well today on this cold and snowy day in Edmonton and staying warm and safe. So good afternoon all, and apologies for the bit of a technological glitch. It's all my fault here. So welcome to today's speaker series webinar for Edmonton Housing Month. This is the last day of our housing month. My name is Gord Johnston. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Civida and today's host for our webinar. So just a few administrative items before we get going. This is the last Lunch and Learn webinar for Housing Month. This is going to be recorded, and the recording, as I'm told, will be available on the housingmonth.ca, that's housingmonth.ca website by this Friday. Today, our webinar is a conversation with David Williams, Assistant Deputy Minister from the Housing Division of Seniors, Community and Social Services with the Government of Alberta. It's a pleasure to have you here, David. I know that you're a very busy guy, and we all really appreciate you taking the time to come and have a conversation with us. So we have some prepared questions to ask David today, but joining me to ask those questions are Susan McGee. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Homeward Trust, and Nick Lilley. He is the CEO of Homeward. So as the host, I'm going to ask the first question, and then I'm going to ask Nick to ask a couple of questions. Then I'm going to ask Susan to ask the two final questions. So 5 questions, and there may be a couple, 3 sub questions, depending on the responses from David. And then at approximately 12:45 or so, depending on how the conversation goes, we're going to open up the QA to those on the call here. To ask questions of our guest David. So please be sure to post your questions in the chat function, and we will try to get to as many of your questions before 1 p.m. as we possibly can. So I'm now going to ask David, Susan, and Nick to tell the folks here a little bit about yourself. So David, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself first, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. My name's David Williams. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for Housing here with the Government of Alberta, and very, very pleased to join you here for Housing Month, and happy to take any of your questions. So I've met many of you who are on the call, and look forward to having a discussion with you today.
Perfect. Thanks, David. And now I'll hand it over to Nick. If you can introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. Nick Lilley, as Gord mentioned, CEO of Homeward, the City of Edmonton Nonprofit Housing Corporation. Been in the role here for about a year and a half, but Homeward has certainly been a part of the Edmonton community fabric for almost 44 years now, and we've been focused on providing quality, affordable housing. But within the context of today's environment, our focus is really shifting to emphasize an increase in the supply of affordable housing, as well as trying to make the existing stock as sustainable and accessible to Edmontonians as we can. So looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. And Susan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time for this important conversation. I'm Susan McGee. I'm the CEO of Homeward Trust Edmonton, and we are an organization responsible for Edmonton's community-based plan to end homelessness, really an aggregator of some of our public dollars directed at homelessness initiatives. And we have operated and then fund agencies to provide support in supportive housing environments, really those deeper subsidy but high level of support. And that's certainly a big gap in our community. But from a planning perspective, I would add that the need is so high, and we need a lot, and we need a real range, and we need the affordable housing and the social housing, the deep housing stock to really meet the affordability issues that so many folks in our community are facing. So, with that, look forward to learning a little bit more from David today, and questions from the audience.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks, Nick, and thanks, David. So without further ado, we'll get to the first question for you, David. So obviously there's been some changes in the structure of government lately, and given the recent formation of the Ministry of Seniors, Community and Social Services, can you tell us what opportunities you see within the new ministry structure, including employment services, income supports, houselessness supports, AISH, and family violence prevention, amongst others, because it's a big ministry for sure, that may lead to more community-based integrated service delivery and ultimately better outcomes for those that we are collectively here to serve. And then a subpart to that, David, is how we as housing organizations and service delivery partners, how we can help to achieve improved outcomes given this new structure.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks very much, Gord, for the question. And I think you're right. There's lots of really good opportunities. I think, it's fair to say when the changes were announced, we were quite excited internally to be able to work with that. So, Cynthia, our new deputy minister, has had a great range of experience across the social service sector and is truly a visionary and a leader in this space. And so really having the opportunity to work together with her and the rest of the team from the former CSS ministry has been awesome. And I think, there's what I find is we've done a lot of collaboration over the last several years in developing the housing strategy and working forward. And there's been a lot of intentional collaboration, and we've gotten a lot of benefits from that and understanding, the importance of those wraparound supports and how to integrate them in with housing. But it's really been kind of one of the benefits of coming together as a bigger ministry I didn't think of is, below the sort of executive level down to the working level, we have way more interactions now and across the time. So there's been a number of times that we've seen concerns that Albertans have raised that we're like, actually, we could probably help you with that, as opposed to sending them to someone else and sending them through. It's as it goes through, there's the opportunity to connect those supports internally within government a little bit better. And I think, part of where we were going through the housing strategy was around the idea of introducing tenant support workers and bringing that type of level in there. And I think already in the first, 2 months we've sort of been together, I've learned a lot about the support agencies and the support worker functions in the other parts of our ministry. And I think there's things that we can integrate, and there's a lot of efficiencies that we can find with getting the right type of people and the right type of supports connected to people a lot faster. So, I think there's a lot of opportunities to move forward on this. I know there's lots of people who were, I got lots of comment and feedback from stakeholders about, well, is government still focused on housing? Is housing still a priority in the new ministry? I don't see it in the title anywhere. It's not there. I had the opportunity to travel around Southern Alberta last week with Minister Nixon, and one of the things he'll talk about is he goes, well, I'm the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services, but don't forget housing is right in there. It's just sort of a bracket. We just couldn't fit it on the business card, right? So it's very clear. It's still a key priority. And I think, Gord, we had started to take some of our steps in the right direction to start connecting some of the things. So whether it was, up at your new Londonderry property around, with Boys and Girls Club, maybe introducing some of that childcare in there. Childcare has been an easy one for us to focus on at the community level because I think it's such a needed support for almost everyone's clients here. But I think, there's an opportunity for the, our housing organizations, the HMBs, other service delivery partners, to not only look to government for some coordination, but to do some of that coordinating work yourselves and come to us with coordinated plans too. That makes it easier on our side as well. So, I think we're prepared. And one of the things that we look to do as we move into new types of partnerships and different models is to try and integrate more of those services right into community where it is coming. So I think we've got an opportunity here, and the initial days we've started to flesh out what some of that would look like. So I think there's the opportunity for us to be better coordinated internally, and I think there's the opportunity for us to be more responsive to coordinated and collaborative approaches coming from community to us as well. So, yeah.
Thanks, David. I know on the part of Civida, and I'm sure on the part of everyone on the call here, we're very much looking forward to those opportunities for some improved outcomes. We as Civida, I didn't tell the audience too much about our organization here, but we have the honor and privilege of owning and or operating about 5,200 homes, mostly in the community housing space and in Edmonton, and approximately 40% of the people who live in our homes are either on AISH or income support. So that integrated approach across divisional lines within the ministry, we're very, very much looking forward to those opportunities here. So thank you for that. Nick, I think I'll hand it over to you now to ask the next couple of questions.
Great, thanks, Gord, and thanks, David, for that. Obviously, everyone's happy to hear housing is still a priority within that little bit larger ministry. But one key facet of the previous ministry, or a key strategic priority, was the Stronger Foundations 10-year strategic plan. And so, amidst these changes, maybe you can give us some indication. Is the government still committed to the continued implementation of that ambitious plan, which could see the increase of, I think, 13,000 more units of affordable housing, increasing rent supplements by another 12,000. So maybe you can just more so give us an update of where the government is at with the implementation there. And then more so, where are the opportunities that the housing organizations in Edmonton can assist you in that even further?
Thanks, Nick, for the question. And I think, so first and foremost, the Stronger Foundation strategy remains a priority of government. So we were really pleased to see in the mandate letter our minister received from the Premier, it was referenced right by name that we're going to continue with the implementation of the strategy, and the government is fully committed to moving forward towards that the goal of increasing 25,000. We've got a number of initiatives on the way. So the asset management framework has been released, which is one of the key building parts. We have sent out the needs assessment piece to make some of those changes and adjustments. We've started to work through, the Housing Act changes were brought in last year at this time. So we're really starting to put through a lot of those building blocks and those foundational pieces that we require to sort of have all of the authorities in place to begin moving forward. So we've, in the last couple of years, we've built another, 1,900 homes, and we're well on our way towards getting to that goal. The partnership program will come out very shortly, and it will be the next sort of step in launching on that side. We've recently announced the expansion of the temporary rent assistance benefit into an additional 80 communities, which has also provided a bit of rent relief for individuals in temporary circumstances. So we're starting to expand those programs. In the next year or two, the budget shows the rent supplement is going to increase, and so we will increase along those lines by several thousand on the way to that 12,000 number. So we're really excited sort of with the progress we've made to date, and being able to sort of share that in the coming months, with everyone around where we're at. And I think, we're working through the needs assessments. We're working very closely with the City of Edmonton to properly understand the needs in the City of Edmonton and what types of housing there's a need for. And I know in Susan's introduction, she talked about it's across the spectrum, and it certainly is. And let's try and, narrow that down to what is it, where and targeted and that sort of stuff. So we're working through with the City of Edmonton very closely on that to articulate those needs, and looking forward to beginning to start making some of the investments on the capital side to start addressing some of those needs. So, one thing, we've been challenged with over the pandemic is supply lines and supply shortages, inflationary pressures. All of those sorts of things are something that we have to manage, and we know that all of you have been managing. So working through this, the pace probably isn't as fast as we would have originally liked it to be, but we're going to set this up for success so that, I'd rather start walking and then running as opposed to running and then realize we've tripped and fallen and had to, get up and start walking in another direction. So we're making good progress, and we're going to continue to make good progress. I think, every year in the provincial budget, there's more money coming into housing, and that's the way we like to see it in terms of being able to expand access moving forward. So so still a number one priority for our ministry, and certainly a top priority for our minister.
Great. Well, thanks for that. And you mentioned specifically that asset management framework within that strategy. And obviously, year one you've got some learnings there. You mentioned you're happy with some progress, but pace again remains a little bit not exactly where you wanted it to be. So maybe just reflect on this year, any learnings from the implementation of the framework this far, specifically around those core pillars of sell, retain, invest, and transfer. And then again, more specifically, where do you see affordable housing providers in Edmonton being able to engage on this? What's the outlook for next year and more into the coming years?
Yeah, so under the asset management framework, we've started sort of under each of those pillars. So the most work I think we've done probably has been on the transfer side. We're beginning to work through the assets to look at which assets we should transfer to sort of our existing operators so that they can continue to be utilized. And we always suspected that we'd have some nice back and forth around this and understanding, because some of the assets are in great condition, some of the assets are not in great condition. They're all over the map, and some assets have a lot of development potential, some assets don't. So one of the things that we learned was just that it's really hard to generalize that we have 3,000 assets, so there's 3,000 stories, and each one is vastly different. So that doesn't always suit well in the government world, where we tend to like to box things into nice big policy parameters to try and fit all these individual stories in. So for year one of the transfer, we've started slowly. I think we have about 25 to 50 properties we've identified that we think we'd like to transfer. We've heard from operators that there's a number of properties that they would like to have transferred, and we're in that process of negotiating through and making sure that when we do transfer the property, it's set up for success. So we've been starting to look around and come out with communication shortly around what the transfer support would look like, because we recognize that all the buildings, if you're 30, it's a 30-year-old building, there's probably some maintenance problems associated with it, and government tends to fund on a maintenance basis as it breaks, as opposed to before it breaks, and setting up a reserve fund. So there'll be the need to do that. So we're working through that to get forward. So those conversations have started. One of the things I've encouraged organizations to do is particularly if you have a lot of properties that are provincially owned and you want to see them transferred, is we have to work through this in stages. So every time we go to transfer something, there's an expense hit for accounting reasons on my books, and so I only get so much expense room to do this. So can we work strategically to think about this? We've gotten a couple of requests. I'll take the whole portfolio. It'd be great. I'll just take it. Well, I can't do that in a year financially, and I'm not sure organizations would be ready to take over that amount right away either. So can we work on a strategic plan that we both sort of agree to in what order, I think is really helpful. On the sales side, we have 2 properties for sale right now. One is in Edmonton, so the old Eric Cormack Center. One of my key learnings on that was I had no idea how difficult it would be to sell such a large property. So it's with the offers and the complicating competing parts of the bids and going through the assessment with the land, it takes much longer than I had assumed it would. So it will probably be for sale up until, by the time the final documents are done, it won't be until late in the spring, just from the process. So for me personally, that was a learning to get the due diligence and the best offers. We've got quite a few offers already in on that one. And I think, and then the other one is a property up in Slave Lake, which we acquired during the fires as temporary relief shelter. And it's not being used for anything. It was a former doctor's office. So downtown, really not, strip mall type property, not really appropriate for long-term housing. So we don't have as many properties. We get lots of questions. Probably the number one question I get from people is around sales, and sales is probably the smallest pillar. And I think just getting that message out that very few properties will actually be sold, because most of our properties are suitable for housing, and so we should continue to try and use them sort of within the housing realm. And then on the investment side, I have been pleasantly surprised with the number of creative proposals we've started to receive, unsolicited, from various groups. And I think I'm really pleased with the sector and pleased with some of the innovative thinking going on, especially in Edmonton, around different ways to look at how we can do affordable housing and different ways to put projects together. Really sort of thinking outside of the box. Some of that outside of the box thinking has challenged our partners at CMHC in terms of how could we adapt to people thinking outside of the box and trying to focus on what the outcomes are that we're trying to achieve. So, that'll continue to be a challenge, and just, but I think we've started to get a little bit better with CMHC and aligning some of our cycles moving forward, especially on the investment side, because they will be a key investment partner for us going forward, and that part is very important. So I think we're making really good progress on the asset management side. Even just getting in place an asset management process and system and framework was really important. You'd think we would have one of those, given the number of assets we have, but not having one was really limiting in terms of what we were able to do. So I think we're making pretty good progress on that front. And I think now with the new minister in place and government moving forward, we've got the runway to be able to start accelerating and to catch up a little bit on that front.
Great, thanks, David. Just one quick clarification. Just when you mentioned sort of those unsolicited proposals, more in the investment category, is that a formal process, or those just sort of sneaking their way into the ministry and kind of considered as they come?
So government has sort of the unsolicited proposal process that is a formal process that you can go through the Department of Infrastructure. But these proposals are more just, most groups I meet with leave me with a nice brochure and an ask, and that's sort of what I mean by the unsolicited ones. And all of those groups will have to go through the partnership program when it launches here right away. So in order to apply for it, but that'll be part of our going forward. But yeah, that's sort of what I mean by unsolicited.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks, David. And just before I hand it over to Susan for a couple of questions here, I'm told that the chat function isn't working for some reason or other. So when we get to the participant Q&A here after Susan's questions, I'm going to get you to raise your hand, and then our comms people here will enable you to chime in and actually verbally ask your question. So just in case you're looking for the chat function, there's a reason why it isn't here. Okay, Susan.
Thanks. And thanks, David. You've touched on a couple of things that really segues into my question, and certainly bringing up CMHC, the orders of government that have to work together on this important file, and the partnership program. And I think language-wise, what I just want to recognize is that amongst those that might be in the audience or listening to this later, there's management bodies, there's also nonprofit, Part 9, there's a real range. And so our vernacular, depending on our relationship with the ministry, may be a little different. So I just want to emphasize that, because when we talk about, the partnership program, there will be many, stakeholders interested in that. And it really just gets into that complexity of the funding structures. So my question around the federal, provincial, municipal government related to the investment in housing, how the government of Alberta is ensuring that it is maximizing the capital cost shared and the dollars available flowing to housing organizations. Specifically, again, to the partnership program, a little more details if you haven't. I know it's long awaited, and you've already alluded to kind of like imminent in terms of those details. And then, what those key deliverables look like under the program, and housing organizations and Edmonton specifically, how we can best be prepared for that opportunity. I want to flag, as I'm asking this question, and the imminent nature of it, is Rapid Housing 3 is announced. It's open. There's really like some time sensitivity around the positioning and the scope of that program by itself, let alone the many other programs that might interact with the partnership program structure. So just, help us, help you, help us, just in terms of shedding some light on that.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Really good questions, and I appreciate that the launch of the partnership program has been imminent for quite some time. So every time I say it, I feel like that's true, and it is true. But things get delayed and things get bumped. But certainly cognizant of the RHI timelines, I think we'll be okay on those to be able to have some joint evaluations, and you to have an understanding as. because the RHI timelines will be open until March. So to be able to have at least some understanding as to where the province will be in terms of being able to help support some of those. So I think we'll be okay on those front. And Susan, I think your point is very well made. And yeah, I'm not the world's most careful person with language. So housing organizations, there are a massive spectrum across the province, and all are certainly part of the strategy and will certainly be part of what we see going forward, and certainly eligible under the partnership program. And we would like to work with new and different partners and more partners and as we go forward. So one of the things that we've done very intentionally is when the program launches, you'll see the application form will look very similar to CMHC's application form and the City of Edmonton's form. So we've worked both the City of Edmonton and the City of Calgary to ensure that what we're asking for is no different than what they're asking for, and that you can largely lift and shift anything you've done for CMHC into our application form. And so that you're not having to have a consultant make money on one form and then on a second form and then on a third form. And we spend all of our money on consulting fees, which is wonderful for consultants, but not so great for, building of houses. So that is really been something we've intentionally done. Actually, I'm going down to Calgary tomorrow, and part of the reason I'm going down to Calgary is to meet with Edmonton and Calgary and CMHC in person to walk through some of the approval processes for some of these projects and how can we jointly share and align those. Because I think the one that highlighted for me was one of the release of the federal release of land up on the former military base was problematic. So they released land to projects we had chosen not to fund. They provided land to projects we had chosen to fund. They didn't provide land to. So it was a real miss, I think, from a government coordination perspective. And so we've put in some processes, including a tripartite capital committee that is now meeting on a monthly basis that will be looking at all of these proposals. One of the things you'll see on our forms is an acknowledgement that when you submit it to us, you are acknowledging that it will be shared with, in your case, Edmonton and with the federal government, so we can work together and try and prevent you having to shop around. And we'll do some of the coordination. We're trying to do some of the coordination behind the scenes so that if you've applied to us, we'll work with CMHC to see if they're going to fund it and say, like, no, these are the ones that we're supporting. These are the ones that you should support too, and try and minimize some of that, so you don't have to run around and get a letter from me that says, yeah, we love this project. Then you get a letter from CMHC that I need that says, so we're going to try and do some of that to try and make it easier for folks in behind the scenes to try and do this, because there is a real opportunity to access some of the federal funding on the capital side, and across a basket of programs that are offered by the new ministry, including on the houselessness side and the homelessness side. So we've got, we're really working to ensure that we do maximize every dollar that we can come in here. Under RHI 3, the federal government did do some consultations. They had some movement towards things that we'd asked for in terms of being able to make the program a little bit better and a little bit more accessible. Alberta got penalized last time because one of the key factors was the overall cost of housing. And while the overall cost of housing in Alberta remains low relative to Ontario and Lower Mainland BC, a $450,000 house is still out of reach for many Edmontonians. So, it's still something that we have to address. And I think that was sort of a real odd way of assessing projects around, that the federal government used. So that's kind of the spur there. And I think we're trying to be intentional. For a while, the province didn't have any new additional capital dollars to invest into programs. And so we kind of got out of the loop. And there was lots of conversations between the municipalities and the federal government that we weren't necessarily a part of. So we're sort of inserting back that in and trying to play that coordinating role to help out a lot of our agencies. And Edmonton's been a really good partner for us on that front to date. And CMHC appears to be willing-ish to listen and to work with us. So we're going to do as much as we can on that side to try to do that. So I'm sure we'll have bumps and misses along the way, because it's never ideal when you try and get three governments to line up the lists of what they like to support. But we are going to try and do that and make it as administratively simple for organizations. I'd rather you guys spend more time, building than lobbying and having to worry about that. So that's kind of where we're trying to go on there. And so one of the things is, as the partnership program rolls out, we will have specific sessions that will be open to everyone to walk through how it looks, some training sessions. I know we did one recently for a number of housing providers across the spectrum or with CMHC to try and get everybody up to speed as to what CMHC's programs are going to look like. So wherever we can, we're trying to bring all three orders of government together to be able to talk to people at once. So you're getting the answers there, and we're trying to see, there's only so many ways you can look at a financial statement. So the project's either valid or it's not. And I don't know, why we'd have to do different ones. So that's kind of where we're at, Susan, on that.
Thanks, David. And, I have to say, like, there's no special math on this. The lights have to stay on. And I really appreciate that comment. I'd be remiss if I didn't loop back to Gord's first comment around the fact that within the ministry, there's the various programs and the work, and a big challenge is that sustainability. So there's the capital side, and you've spoken really clearly and lots of progress on the coordination of those capital applications, but some of what the province offers, or like within our kind of range of programs, is to help with the sustainability side. So hopefully that's part of those conversations, and the capital is one thing, but this is a long game. We're all in this for the long game. So I'd be remiss if I didn't connect those dots.
No, absolutely, Susan. Definitely part of it. The operating side is trickier from us from a budgetary perspective sometimes to connect. But part of the reason we got into trouble on the first one is we didn't know what the federal government was announcing on the capital side until it was in the newspaper. And then we were behind the ball because we were out of sync with our operating budgets and a variety of different things. So I'm hoping that communication and coordination at the front end around the capital side will translate and trickle down onto the operating side as well, because you're right, like a number of you can have a shiny new building, but if there isn't the staff in there to work and to provide the supports, it's not going to matter. And the building can't open and it can't run. So, certainly trying to do a better job on the operating side of getting some of that coordination done, and not sort of letting, part of it that is us working closely with the cities to articulate priorities, so we understand where each other is trying to go, and that helps us build better budgets so that we can deal with the operating and the sustainability side on that for sure.
Great. Well, all of us are well aware, I think, that there's a significant overrepresentation of Indigenous community members in those experiencing poverty, precariously housed, often at a high risk of losing housing or making decisions between, really basic need budget items, and also many without housing. Over 60% in our community that are unhoused identify as Indigenous. So with that need, and recognizing that the government of Alberta has made commitments through the Indigenous housing through the Indigenous Housing Capital Program, and has worked with nations and organizations in supporting projects, the need far exceeds the capital. And it was, I think, again, to scale a start, it was a beginning, but we also see that CMHC has been working on distinction-based, and by that, the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations strategies under the National Housing Strategy, and more recently committed to an urban, rural, and northern strategy with 300 million immediately committed, and significantly more, certainly overtures to significant commitments in the future. Thinking about Indigenous organizations and how to support our community partners in meeting that need, if you have any thoughts on that. And again, to the intergovernment, it's interesting that on the Rapid Housing 3, there is an Indigenous stream, but I understand it will be available to Indigenous governments. And so like the formality of those nations, which is a different paradigm for the province, given on-reserve and off-reserve opportunities. So it is more complex. And when we talk about orders of government in our country, it isn't just provincial, federal, and municipal. So on that, how can we collectively ensure that we're supporting Indigenous-led projects and meeting the need for community members?
Yeah, so really good question, and absolutely. We've every year the budget for IHCP has increased slowly, and I think we're going to continue that, and that is certainly something we've been advocating for because it is oversubscribed. Every year we get more projects than we can fund, and I think there's a ton of great projects that I'd love to be able to help and support underneath there. And so it is, the $300 million that the federal government's committed for their urban, rural, and northern strategy is interesting. There's no actual money for housing necessarily under there. It's to develop a strategy and go through a large process that will be led by Indigenous organizations with federal government sort of guidance and some provincial government involvement. But it really is around developing a strategy. So one of the things we pressed the federal government with is, yes, strategies are great, but that's a lot of money to spend on a strategy. We'd love to see some more houses built and some more housing built from there, particularly on reserve. So I know there's a number of capacity building initiatives that are required within some Indigenous communities to be able to get up and to be able to run their own projects, because ultimately the goal of both the IHCP project and the federal government is to have Indigenous-led housing by Indigenous folks for Indigenous folks, and working that way through. So I think that's one of the things that's been really important to us. In terms of learnings, like from the IHCP program, we've had a number of proposals that just haven't been successful because they don't have that Indigenous-led component. And so it really is about about matching the expertise of Indigenous groups and Indigenous organizations with some of the expertise that you guys have in your organizations. And so one of the things we have looked at and have been sort of in the initial parts of exploring is, can we do a bit of matchmaking and make arrangements? So where we find Indigenous groups who are looking for housing expertise, can we match them with people with housing expertise who need Indigenous expertise? And can we do some of that at the provincial level? And I think that's something that we're looking to try and put together over the coming year in terms of those sorts of, we always think of these big trade shows that we did in the oil sands and other areas. We could do something like that in affordable housing too, on a much different scale, obviously. But I think there's the ability to try and do that to match skills going forward. So I think we're fully committed to trying to expand Indigenous housing and to work very closely with the Indigenous community to make sure that we get the right types of housing where they need and where they met as the sort of fourth order of government in Canada. And I think, it is interesting to see. We haven't heard too much about the Indigenous stream under the RHI. The federal government hasn't shared much of that with the provincial governments in great detail, other than what we've been able to learn sort of from what's publicly available. So the first two streams had a lot of Indigenous programs, and some of them were pretty good and some of them were not as successful. So we're happy to continue to work with Indigenous groups to move the housing dial forward, because that is a largely underserved community, and unfortunately a growing in size underserved community. And so however we can work to address that, we're willing to do that.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, David. So some folks are starting to drop off as they move on to their 1 p.m. commitments here, but I'd like to open up the floor to see for those online, if there's any questions that they want to pose to David. Got time for one or two questions here. I'm not seeing any, so I think maybe we'll wrap things up, David. So I just wanted to, I know that I safely speak on behalf of Susan and Nick and I, and certainly all of the other housing providers in the Edmonton region here, in thanking you for your tireless commitment. You're a hard-working guy, and I know that any time I've tried to call you, you've always picked up the phone, and you're a real advocate for those in need of housing, not only in the Edmonton region, but certainly across the entire province. And for that, I could safely say that we're all grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So thanks. Yeah. So I think that wraps up. And so I hope everyone online enjoyed the questions and answers here. The answers in particular, I did. And we will call it a wrap here. And again, the recording of this is going to be available on Friday at, I'll give you the website once more, housingmonth.ca. Okay. Thanks all. And thanks again, David. Okay. See you there.